built for war. The Second World War was tearing railways apart, not just in Great Britain, but across Europe and as far away as the Middle East. Locomotives were either being attacked or run into the ground with high demands set upon them. It became apparent more engines were needed, but with none available, it fell down to the United States to fill the need. They had the money and the undamaged industry to build steam engines that were so desperately needed. Two types of engine were built. The first was a large freight engine, the S-160, built with 8 driving wheels to tackle the heaviest of freight trains and easy to maintain. The second was a small tank engine, the S-100. These locomotives had a short wheelbase, 6 small wheels, and an unusual array of 3 domes behind the chimney. These engines were built to the British standard loading gauge, so they could operate in any country. They were quickly tested on site, and then the vast quantities of engines were shipped to Britain. There they awaited distribution to other countries, but some, mostly the S-160s, were put into use on freight trains before they were sent away. They made quite an incongruous sight on the Great Western Railway. Footplate crews, who loved nothing but Great Western motive power, found them difficult to adapt to. They did work hard, even if they did appear and sound odd. A deep booming American chime whistle was certainly surprising compared to the high-pitched British whistle of the Great Western. However, the tank engines were not favoured with such outings. They remained in store and one by one were sent to mainland Europe and the Middle East. At Eastleigh Motive Power Depot on the southern region, a B4, which shunted at the works, had failed. There was no time or materials to mend the engine, so a decision was made to borrow one of the American tank engines. The B4 seemed a little concerned. "I hope this new engine knows what they are doing." The new engine arrived the next day. It wore black, with Transportation Corps in white lettering on the tank sides. The engine looked around nervously. A group of young women walked up to the engine. "Is this our new engine?" asked one. "That's right, love, but I wouldn't be expecting much," advised the driver. "It's a poor steamer and hasn't said a word since we left the warehouse. Good luck." The driver and fireman left. One of the girls spoke out. "I'm Margaret, and this is Donna, Jean, and Audrey. Now what's your name?" The engine said nothing. "Come on, Yank, out with it!" The engine still said nothing. "Now I won't have any of this nonsense," grumbled Margaret. "You are here to work with us. The least you can do is speak when you are spoken to. Now, what is your name?" "It's an ugly-looking thing. Not as nice as Granville over there," observed Jean. "Don't be rude, I think it's quaint," interrupted Donna. "There's nothing quaint about this engine. It doesn't even have a running board." "Well, we are in a time of austerity." "That doesn't make any difference. American engines are quite ugly anyway." "Oh, shut up, Jean. The poor engine won't breathe a word at this rate. Can't you see it's shy?" snapped Donna. "It'll never tell us its name now." "I think it doesn't have a name," said Audrey. "It doesn't seem to have a number either." The ladies looked, and sure enough, there was no number. "Hello," stuttered the engine. The girls looked abashed. "Hello," said the engine again. "That's a girl's voice," smiled Donna. "It's a girl. Oh, she's one of us." "Yes, but she still hasn't told us her name," replied Margaret. "May I interrupt?" asked the B4. "Yes, Granville. Can you explain this?" "I think the poor dear doesn't know how to speak English," he explained. "I hear they are tested so quickly and kept in store that they aren't given the time to learn how to speak, because they haven't had any interaction with many people and engines." "Oh, the poor darling," sighed Donna sadly. "Oh, we must teach her. We haven't the time," groaned Margaret. "Oh, but we must," agreed Audrey. "How will she know what we wanted to do if she can't talk or understand us?" Margaret looked up at the engine. "Very well, but she must learn on the job." The girls agreed and set to work. The engine smiled sheepishly, whilst Granville winked happily to her. Throughout Britain, women had taken up many job roles as men went off to fight. They worked everywhere, in many different industries, and the railway was no exception. The only duty women could not do was to drive a locomotive, but nevertheless they were trained to do so should they have to. The girls acted as fireman and yard shunter. They worked alongside Andy, an old engine driver who was too old to fight in the war. He found it hard to adapt to the new engine. "Blasted thing," he complained. "Come on, Andy," laughed Jean. "I could drive this with me eyes shut. Everything's all mixed up. I hate these Yank engines." "Don't be so nasty," protested Donna. "It's not her fault." "Where are the instructions?" asked Audrey innocently. "Engines don't come with instructions," barked Andy. "Well, neither did me dad's radio. He didn't touch it for weeks until I showed him how to use it." "Oh, and did it work?" "No, I only ended up breaking it," sighed Audrey wistfully. "Well, if you can't work a radio, you aren't going near this," huffed Andy. The poor engine was shuddering and bumping about. "Give it here," shouted Jean. Andy moved aside, and in no time at all, Jean had the engine running smoothly. Andy was secretly impressed. "You know you're not meant to be driving." "Yeah, but we won't tell if you don't," chuckled Jean. The girls worked hard, and the little tank engine was very pleased now someone was driving her properly. By the end of the day, the girls agreed she should be called Rosie. Whilst Rosie couldn't thank them, her eyes lit up and her smile was as broad as her smoke box. "I think she likes it," grinned Donna. Over the coming days and weeks, Rosie worked very hard. She soon knew her way around the works and shunted everything into its proper places. The girls took it in turns to teach Rosie how to speak. Donna made the most effort and would come after hours and read her stories. She took many by surprise. Everyone expected her to have an American accent, but due to the girls' teachings, she developed an eloquent English accent. Rosie was a fast learner, and the girls looked on proudly when at last she was able to have a full conversation with Granville. My, Rosie, you are a far cry from that shy, timid engine I first saw." "I feel I can do anything now," she beamed. "Indeed you can, if there wasn't a war going on." "Oh yes, I forgot," she sighed. Rosie was young and naive. She had forgotten all about the war and what she had been sent to do. Inside Eastleigh Works, they weren't just repairing engines and coaches. They built other things, objects that were to contribute to the war effort. They were producing anti-tank gun barrels and multiple rocket launchers, plus landing craft, fuel tenders and harbour launches. All of these were always sheeted under a tarpaulin before hastily taken away. Rosie had never seen these, but she began to grow suspicious as to why Granville had not been repaired yet. "They're making important tools to help win the war," explained Granville. "They have no time for me, and I understand that." "But don't you want to steam again?" asked Rosie, perplexed. "Of course I do," replied Granville. "I work at Southampton docks. I was sent here to help. They have plenty of other engines working at the docks, but when I broke down I wasn't a priority. I will steam again, but I must be patient." Rosie was still puzzled. "You be careful, my dear. Works and dockyards are prime targets for the enemy," advised Granville darkly. Rosie felt hesitant, but was unsure why. Later, Margaret asked Rosie to pull a landing craft out of the works. "Be gentle, it'll be a tight squeeze out of the works doors," she explained. Rosie slowly ventured into the works. She could see hundreds of landing craft being constructed as far as the eye could see. As she buffered up to its wagon, the landing craft was yet to be covered. Rosie shuddered. This was her first taste of things to come, and she didn't like it. Inch by inch, she edged the landing craft out of the workshop's door. She repeated the maneuver several times as she dragged each landing craft carefully out. Realizing what their intended use was for, She found this task very harrowing. One night, Rosie was sat with Granville in the siding when air raid sirens began to echo in the distance. Both engines looked at each other in disbelief. Suddenly, they could hear a distinctive droning noise from up above. Then there was a faint whistling noise, followed by an earth-shuddering explosion. "Are they coming for us?" quivered Rosie. "No, they've come for Southampton," whispered Granville. More and more explosions rumbled in the distance. Towers of light dashed across the night sky. An eerie orange glow began to appear. At that moment, Margaret, Donna, Jean and Audrey came running into the yards. "Come on, girls, we've got to go and help," cried Margaret. "No time to wait for Andy. People's lives are at stake." They clambered into Rosie and coupled up to a row of tankers. They were specially designed to tackle fires close to the line. Granville watched on as Rosie puffed quickly away. She didn't think about getting hurt. All she could think about was helping others. The explosions grew louder. Engines with passenger trains fled in the other direction. They rounded the bend and almost immediately they were hit with the force of a huge blaze. It lashed at them through a burning building. The heat was unbearable. The girls helped the firemen tackle the fire. They fought hard. More and more bombs were dropping, but still the girls held their ground. Rosie could only watch in horror as Southampton burned. By morning, the German aircraft had flown away, and the majority of the fires had been put out. Granville waited anxiously for Rosie's return. At last, she steamed wearily into the works with the girls on board. "Thank goodness you're all safe," puffed Granville, relieved. The girls plodded wearily home. "Well done, Rosie," smiled Margaret. "You did us proud." Rosie gave a subdued smile. She waited for them to leave, and then sobbed quietly with Granville by her side. Rosie and the girls went to Southampton's aid several times afterwards. It soon dawned upon Rosie that, although she wasn't built for military purposes, she was built as an act of war, something she struggled to get her head round. A few days later, Granville was finally sent into the works. He was given a complete overhaul, and when he was mended, Rosie's services were no longer needed. The girls were most upset. Even Margaret had grown fond of Rosie. The little American engine they had loved and cared for was now going to be sent away. Granville felt very guilty, but Rosie understood. "My services will be required elsewhere. I will miss you all," she said sadly. On the day Rosie was to be transferred to the warehouse for storage, the four girls dressed themselves up. Their hair neatly curled, and what was left of their makeup was highlighted beautifully on their faces. Rosie's chimney and dome were being sheeted over as she looked happily at the four girls. "You look beautiful," she gasped. "I hope you haven't gone to all this trouble just for me." "Of course we have," chuckled Donna. "Who do you think we'd done it for?" chortled Audrey. "Who do you think we'd done it for?" chortled Audrey. "Well, it ain't for old Andy, that's for sure," Jean teased. Margaret looked solemnly at Rosie. "We wanted to do this for you, as a goodbye. We wanted to look our best." "Oh, I wish you wouldn't," joked Rosie. "I don't look half as glamorous as you all do." "Don't worry," soothed Audrey. "When the war is over, we'll find you, and we'll paint you bright pink, so you look like a pretty young girl, as you should be. Oh, none of this dull black." "You're one of us now. You look like a Hollywood movie star," said Donna. "Thank you. I'd like that very much," replied Rosie softly. But no one really thought that would ever come true. An engine arrived to take Rosie away. "Come on, Yank," called the engine. "Her name is Rosie," scoffed Margaret, "and you will treat her with some respect." The engine said no more and coupled up. Rosie departed sadly, with the 4 girls and Granville waving goodbye until she was out of sight. But Rosie's story doesn't end there. She was put into storage with many other S-100s waiting to be exported to mainland Europe. But soon, everything changed. Peace finally descended upon the world. The war was over. Due to the conditions, the war had left many of the world's railways and their fleets. The remaining locomotives were dispatched accordingly, but 15 were bought by the Southern Railway. They were to take up duties as dockyard engines. Rosie was fortunately one of the 15, but unfortunately, she was to become the spare engine. The other tank engines teased her. Built for nothing, they would say. If only they knew what she had done. Over time, Rosie's parts were pinched and stolen to mend other members of her class. She began to look small and grew very depressed. One of the S-100s replaced Granville at Southampton docks. He had hoped it would be Rosie, but sadly it wasn't. He was sent back to Eastleigh to be restored as a static exhibit at Butlin's holiday camp in Skegness. Again, he hoped to see Rosie at the works, but never did. The 4 girls' lives changed too. When the war ended, they had to return their jobs to the rightful employees. The girls didn't see this as very fair, but they had no choice. Donna became a librarian. Jean became a cleaner. Audrey found a job in the fashion industry on Oxford Street, and Margaret remained with the railway. She became a station announcer at London Victoria. Margaret married a boilersmith in the works and would always keep up to date with the comings and goings of the job she once loved. Word soon reached Margaret that Rosie had remained in Britain, but only used for spares. Margaret was, as you must know by now, a very strong-willed and determined woman. She discovered the North Western Railway on the island of Sodor, and how Sir Topham Hatt did not wish to replace his steam locomotives. Margaret wrote countless letters fighting Rosie's cause, and got Donna, Audrey and Jean to join in too. Margaret wrote countless letters fighting Rosie's cause, and got Donna, Audrey and Jean to join in too. S-100s began to be withdrawn and scrapped, and so Margaret scavenged many parts back that were once Rosie's. Rosie remained at the back of the works siding, sad and alone. "I suppose this is it," she murmured. "I guess I'll never run again," and she closed her eyes. Now, my dear, I do not like that sort of talk from an engine," came a voice. Rosie awoke to find a stout-looking gentleman in a top hat. Alongside him were Margaret, Donna, Audrey and Jean. "My goodness, what are you doing here?" she gasped. "Told you we'd find you," chuckled Audrey. "My name is Sir Topham Hatt, and I have been inundated with your cause," explained the Fat Controller modestly. "I have read your case from your adoring associates, and I am in need of a really useful engine to do some heavy shunting for me. It will take some time to restore you, but do you think you are up to the task I ask of you?" "Yes, sir, of course, sir. I'll do anything, sir." "There's a good engine. We can't have useful locomotives not being given an opportunity, can we?" Rosie smiled happily. She hadn't been so happy in years. The Fat Controller tipped his hat politely and left to arrange everything. It took many years to restore Rosie to working order. She had to have a complete new firebox rebuilt like her siblings and missing parts manufactured. When at last she was complete and ready for her repaint, the Fat Controller was under strict instructions from the ladies that Rosie was to be painted pink. "The enthusiasts won't like this," said the painter. "I don't care," replied Rosie cheekily. "I'm one of the girls. For once in my life, I'm finally going to look glamorous." And so she did. She appeared out of the works with a gleaming livery of bright pink. The four ladies were there to see her in all her glory. "You look magnificent," complimented Donna. "A true rose," smiled Margaret. Rosie could only beam proudly. Rosie was very happy to hear that Granville was preserved and now resides at the Bressingham Steam Centre in Norfolk. An anticipated reunion with the two engines was to be planned for the near future. Rosie now works very hard on the Fat Controllers Railway. She demonstrates every day that it was wrong to make her a spare engine, which she proved during the war that she had so much more to give. Her livery is one that catches imaginations everywhere. Some don't like it, whilst others think it striking. Rosie sees it as somewhat liberating, to transform something built for war and austerity and turn it into something with a sense of style and beauty. Rosie wears pink with pride, not just to withhold the promise the four girls made to her, but to prove that there will always be hope with friends and allies through the world's most blackest of days.